간단하게 티타임을 하러 올라가시면 좋을 것 같습니다. 그럼 바로 저희 토크를
So we're gonna start
진행하도록
right away. Yeah. Maybe from the very first question I get.
자, 오늘 제가 사실 미미 톰슨 선생님께 드리고자 질문을 많이 준비했기 때문에 이 파워포인트에 질문이 다 들어있어요. 그래서 질문을 제가 길게 읽지 않고 이제 진행을 하도록 하겠습니다. 이미 사전에 질문지를 드렸기 때문에 통역 선생님도 곧바로 이제 진행을 해서 우리가 오늘 좀 효율적으로 많은 정보와 이야기를 함께 나눠보고자 합니다. 오늘 토크 파워포인트 앞에도 그래서 우리 제임스 로젠퀴스트 선생님 사진을 우리 한번 얼굴이 좀 익숙해져야 되니까요. 넣어보았습니다. 선생님 이제 나이 순서대로 이제 젊어지는 모습으로 넣어보았어요. 네. 이 사진은 우리 데니스 호퍼 배우지만 미술가로도 활동을 했죠. 호퍼가 젊었을 때 찍은 사진이랍니다. 자, 앞에 우리 제임스 로젠퀴스트 선생님의 말씀을 잠깐 인용해 보았습니다. 미술은 경력이 될 수 없다. 나는 시스티나 성당 벽화를 어떻게 그리는 건지 배우고 싶었다. 자, 그리고 팝 아티스트들 가운데 많은 사람들이 상업예술가였다. 리χ텐슈타인은 제도했고 나는 광고판 화가였고 워홀은 상업예술가였다. 이 말도 재미있습니다. 엄마가 날 임신했을 때 프로펠러 공장에서 일하고 있었다. 엄마 책상 뒤에서 사람들이 나무 프로펠러를 조각하고 있었는데 그래갖고 내가 이렇게 우주로 발사된 것 같다라는 말씀을 하셨답니다. 우리 맨 마지막 시대의 작업을 보면 우주적 비전을 다루고 있잖아요. 자, 그러면 첫 번째 우리 간단하게 인사 말씀 부탁드리겠습니다.
Thank you everyone for coming. And I want to thank the Sewa Museum for having me and also for having this incredible exhibition. We're so pleased. The Rosenquist Studio and Foundation is really happy to have the work here in Seoul. And Jim has never really had a show like this in Seoul, so it's a big deal for us, and we're very grateful. It's been such a wonderful group to work with, and we're so happy to have the show and to be here. And thank you all for coming.
자, 우리 로젠퀴스트 작가는 여타 예술가들과는 달리 굉장히 소탈한 편이었습니다. 사실 이게 문화적 배경과 상관이 있기도 하고요. 그리고 또 많은 팝 아티스트들, 특히 미국인 작가들은 시골 출신이에요. 대도시 출신이 아니거든요. 그게 사실 유로피언 작가들하고는 또 차이점이기도 해요. 그의 문화적 배경에 대해서 이제 두 번째 질문을 드리도록 하겠습니다.
Yes, I mean, I think the environment that Jim grew up in really formed his whole visual sense. And he used to say it was like being on another planet growing up in North Dakota and in the Midwest, because he could really see the curvature of the earth and he could really understand that he was on a planet. But it was so surreal out there because the wide open spaces had a lot of natural kind of effects that would affect your eyes as you were looking at something. Something looked huge when it was actually very tiny and almost like a mirage. He really felt that the landscape was just full of odd scale changes and reflections. And I think But I think the openness and the fact that there was really, you had to make your own life out there and your own toys. You had to be entertained by nature, really, and meteors and star showers. So it was a very, very kind of stark but beautiful environment. But it gave your imagination a lot of room to expand. Since it just wasn't so frantic and you weren't distracted, you had a lot of time and space to use your mind.
사진을 조금 준비했는데요. 로젠퀴스트 어렸을 때 모습인데 저 때도 벌써 작가의 개성이 딱 나와 있죠. 꾸부정한 태도가 약간 아저씨 같습니다. 자, 그리고 여기는 친구 라우션버그하고 이제 어울리는 모습인데 딱 봐도 어떻습니까? 이렇게 멋을 부리는 타입은 두 분 다 아닌 거 알 수 있습니다. 사실 우리 라우션버그 작가님은 약간 알코올 중독이었거든요. 자, 그래서 이제 딱 보면 성격을 알 수 있답니다. 자, 보면은 그 사우스다코타, 노스다코타 이쪽이 다 평야예요. 약간 무슨 개마고원 같은 느낌이 조금 든답니다. 우리 한국하고 문화적 차이가 있어서 설명을 드리자면요. 그래서 평야이기 때문에 오히려 비행기 문화가 잘 발달되어 있고 위로 올라가서 전체를 보는 시각 경험이 존재한답니다. 집안이 그래서 파일럿 집안이라고 볼 수 있어요. 작가의 아버지는 항공산업계에서 엔지니어로 일했고요. 자, 그래서 이제 보면은 어릴 적부터 이런 시각 문화 경험이 좀 땅에서 보는 거, 하늘에서 보는 거 이런 데 좀 많이 노출이 될 수 있었습니다. 젊었을 때 보면 미남이죠. 네, 근데 약간 탈모는 일찍 오셨어요. 자, 그래서 이제 이 비행기 관련해서 이제 약간 추가 질문을 드려보도록 하겠습니다.
Yes, I mean, airplanes, it was a big deal because you had to drive for miles and miles to get anywhere. And so Jim and his family and his relatives flew a lot when he was young. And it was before there were many regulations. So his uncle used to take off in an airplane from his farm and go to a bar in another state for a drink. Because he would have had to drive 12 hours if he was driving. But since he had a plane, he thought, why don't I just go over and have a drink at this bar? And he would land in the parking lot. But you could do that then because it was so empty. And Jim's parents tried to start an airline flying from North Dakota to Canada. It was going to be the first international airline, actually. But Jim's uncle, Albert, crashed and died. And so his parents just gave that idea up. But I think that ability, as you said, of looking at things from high above, and then, of course, he later was painting billboards out west and in New York City as well. So he was used to being up high. And he understood, he wasn't afraid of heights at all. And he understood what it was like to kind of live in a space that was off the ground and to operate in a space that was off the ground. And he also, actually, I've just forgotten this, he made for our daughter an airplane out of a cardboard tube and plywood wings. And it was so great. And he found some old wheels and he put on it. He made it really entirely out of junk, but it was beautiful. And then he painted it. And so she used to sit in it when he was little and he would sit in it with her. But of course, it didn't fly. But
자, 사진을 보시면 왼쪽 사진이 이제 엄마와 함께 광고판을 보고 있는 로젠퀴스트예요. 그 다음에 이쪽 사진은 이제 모마에서 전시 63년도에 할 때 62년도가 미국 팝아트가 빵 터진 해니까요. 모마는 63년도에 팝아트를 받아들이거든요. 자, 그래서 거의 모마에서 처음으로 제대로 팝아트가 소개될 때 이제 엄마 아빠가 함께 전시장에 얼마나 아들이 자랑스럽겠어요. 가장 훌륭한 뮤지엄에 당당하게 작품을 놓고 있으니까요. 자, 그래서 보면은 이제 역시 문화적 배경과 관련돼서 사실 이 집안이 이제 스칸디나비아 이민자 가정이거든요. 그러면 이제 스칸디나비아 출신들은 특유의 이런 청교도적 세계관과는 조금 약간 좀 다른 프로테스탄트 개신교의 특유의 세계관이 있거든요. 그러한 윤리의식이나 이런 부분들이 어떻게 작업에 작용했다고 보시는지 궁금합니다.
Well, I think you're right. His parents were incredibly hardworking, and they worked on the farm. They had different jobs all their lives. His father was an airplane mechanic, and I think that they would just do anything to get by. They owned a I guess it was a little motel by the road at a certain point in Jim's life, and he lived in one of the hotel rooms. And when they had a full house, he would have to move in with his parents, and he would bring his toys into their room. And so it was a very a bit hard scrabble, his life. And so he always knew he would have to work, and he worked in high school. At 15, he drove a van and delivered pharmaceuticals to different people that needed them. And he had an ice cream truck. So he always, and as just a human being, he was always up early. He was always dressed. He was always in his studio by 9, and he worked as long as he could every day. And when he wasn't doing that, he was making something else. He was always busy and always productive. And I think it is kind of that Scandinavian farm work ethic which, Rauschenberg had too, not Scandinavian, but growing up in Texas, most of these artists came really from nothing and had to scrape, and there was no one made any money in the art world when they were starting out, and they really did it because they wanted to explore these ideas, and they were going to just do it any way they could. So it was a passionate thing, but they were also realistic about what they had to do to put food on the table.
이번 전시를 위해서 미미 톰슨 선생님이 아주 아름다운 글을 써주셨어요. 이제 두 분이 함께 작은 배에 몸을 싣고 여행했던 이야기를 글로 남겨주셨거든요. 근데 이렇게 조그만 배에 두 분이 탔기 때문에 거의 물에 빠질 것 같은 순간이었다고 합니다. 그래서 글도 요 글인데요. 이렇게 작은 배에 어른 둘이 타면 밤에 조금 위험했겠죠? 자, 그래서 보면은 이게 약간 작가의 성격이나 약간 그런 부분을 알 수 있기도 합니다. 요 글에 대해서만 조금만 말씀해 주시면 좋겠습니다.
There were 2 essays for the catalog coming up, and mine was a more personal look at Jim and some experiences I had with him. So we did, I used one example because this really shows his desire to experiment no matter what. One day we were going to go for a sail. He said, "Do you want to go?" And I said, "Sure." And when we reached the boat, it was a tiny little sea snark meant for one 12-year-old child really to fit in. But nonetheless, we both hopped in the boat and we decided to go have a drink in Sag Harbor. We were going to sail. It was about a half an hour sail. And we got in the boat, and the rub rail of the boat was very, very close to the water. Alarmingly so, but it was kind of humorous at the same time because there were these 2 large adults in this boat meant for a child. And I thought, well, I think we can make it. So we got to the restaurant, had a drink, came back, and it was a beautiful night, and we sailed home. And as we were sailing home, Jim was wondering if the sea snark was given changed just a little bit aerodynamically. Maybe it could actually fly into the air, because we've just been talking about his interest in planes and his family's interest in planes and being in the sky. And he was calculating the whole way home how he could change the hull of this boat into an airplane, and he could do it, fairly easily. And so he had this whole plan, just, his mind. And the point of the story really is that he was endlessly creating things. And even if he's relaxing on a tiny sailboat, which might sink any moment, he really was planning something else altogether. So that story, I just remember that evening so well, because I was just blown away by his calculations and this incredible idea of aerodynamic knowledge that he seemed to have kind of innately, and he was ready to, the minute we landed, go get the materials so he could change it up from a boat to an airboat. And it's just one of many examples of him being endlessly creative and exploring every possibility just to get whatever ideas in his head, into physical reality.
다음번 질문은 조금 뻔한 질문이지만 우리 미술계에서 언제나 나중에 역사를 쓸 때에는 누가 먼저 했느냐를 놓고 따지기도 합니다. 지금까지 우리 미국의 팝아트 역사를 이야기할 때는 앤디 워홀이 먼저냐, 리히텐슈타인이 먼저냐 이렇게 얘기하는데 사실은 로젠퀴스트가 먼저랍니다. 그런데 생전에 작가나 재단은 또 지금도 이렇게 재단 쪽에서 강조하고 있지 않아요. 그 이유가 궁금해요. 이게 59년작 아스토 빅토리아라고 하는 거의 최초의 팝아트에 해당하는 작품이 되겠습니다. 자, 60년도의 작업입니다. 1947, 48, 1950년이라는 작품이고요. 자, 그리고 이제 가장 유명한 작업 가운데 하나죠. 존이라고 하는 60년도, 61년도에 작업한 딥티크 이면화 작품이 되겠습니다. 자, 그래서 왜 우리 로젠퀴스트 재단 쪽에서는 내가 먼저라고 주장하지 않으시는지 그걸 좀 여쭤봤어요.
Well, I think they were all working at the same time, and I know Jim used to talk about this too, but they didn't really know what each other was doing. So they would be in their studios using similar kinds of imagery, but then be surprised when they met and really saw how similar all these, not really similar, but they were all involved in a certain kind of commercial imagery and a certain sort of journey away from abstract expressionism into something that was quite different. Jim used to say he thought the concept of pop art, because none of them really liked that term, none of them really felt that they were that similar, although there were similarities. But I feel that the term really threw all of them off and wasn't something they wanted to embrace. But he felt that in England, back in 1958, say with Richard Hamilton, those things had been explored really before some of the New York artists. But what happened was, because of the scale, he always felt that that's why the Americans got more attention at this time. So I don't think he felt that he had done anything first. I think it was more that everybody was doing it first together, really. It's kind of a collective that they didn't know they were in. So.
자, 다음번 질문도 관련 질문인데요. 이제 더 쉽게 설명을 드리면 로젠퀴스트 작가는 굉장히 중요한 팝 아티스트고 유명하고 위상도 공고하지만 사실 미국 미술관계에서 의외로 저평가된 측면이 있어요. 왜냐하면 미국 팝 아트의 독자성을 조금 부정하고 싶은 게 미국 사람, 더 강조하고 싶은 게 미국 사람들 입장인데 자꾸 로젠퀴스트 작업을 보면 그 이전 시대의 다다와의 연관성이나 유럽 작업과의 연관성을 더 이야기할 수밖에 없게 되는 측면이 있거든요. 자, 그래서 이제 보면은 영국 팝 아티스트들과 연결고리가 아주 희한할 정도로 있는 게 로젠퀴스트 작가인데요. 특히 연결고리 역할을 한 사람이 영국에서 팝아트 운동에 뛰어들었던 로렌스 알로웨이 큐레이터가 61년도에 미국에 와서 구겐하임 미술관 큐레이터가 됩니다. 그래서 이제 여쭤보고 싶은 것 가운데 하나가 이제 알로웨이와 로젠퀴스트가 처음에 어떻게 만났는지. 사실 알로웨이는 영국 사람이고 전쟁 끝나고 난 다음에 미국 문화가 영국에 쏟아져 들어올 때 영국 사람들은 약간 압도감을 느끼고 슬퍼했습니다. 미국화되는 거에 대한 거부감이 있는 거죠. 자, 반면에 미국 작가들은 그런 점은 잘 파악하기가 어려웠답니다. 미국 사람들은 자기네 거니까요. 대중문화라고 하는 것이. 그래서 알로웨이는 팝아트 설명할 때 많은 사람들이 대중문화에 매혹되는 걸 얘기했지만 로젠퀴스트 작가는 역시 문화적 배경 때문인지 모두가 다 그런 대중문화의 이미지에 압도되고 사랑에 빠지는 건 아니다라고 다른 입장을 표하기도 했답니다. 자, 이분이 알로웨이고요. 영국 팝아트 전시 56년도 이제 This is Tomorrow 전시에서 알로웨이가 섹션 2를 담당했고 거기에서 보면은 팝적인 이미저리들이 좀 나오고 미국 영화들 콜라주를 모아서 이렇게 간판, 시네마스코프 간판을 만들기도 했기 때문에 이런 이미지들이 나중에 팝아트의 형성과 강화에 도움을 주었다고 미술사학자들은 생각하는 편이 되겠습니다. 자, 근데 이런 사람이 이제 보면 젊었을 때는 이렇게 에두아르도 파올로치라는 사람의 이런 콜라주들이 이제 미국 문화에 대한 거부감을 메타 비평하는 거예요. 영국 사람 입장에서. 자, 그래서 벙크란 연작이 사실 다다적 방법으로 미국 문화를 비평하는 거고 이게 영국 팝아트의 핵심을 보여줍니다. 반면에 이제 미국 안에서 자국 문화의 요소 갖고 비판을 가할 때는 문제의식이 달라질 수밖에 없는 부분이 있는 거죠. 이제 여기에 대한 질문입니다.
Well, I know Jim did know him, and I think Lawrence Alloway came in 61 to the U.S. and he taught at Bennington. I remember Jim talking about going up to Bennington. I was speaking about this with our archivist, and none of us are exactly sure when they met, but we think it was probably 1962 when Jim had a show with Dick Bellamy at the Green Gallery. And that was his first show with the paintings that you, if you know his work, know him best for probably, like Push Button and Zone. And I think also that one part of the question that I think is so true is that the artists weren't really loving or admiring all these commercial goods that were ending up in their paintings, but they were commenting on the military-industrial complex or the kind of cynicism of paying a lot to advertise Tide and not a lot of money to actually make the product. So they were selling, here we were selling products that were really kind of crummy, and yet they were spending lots of money advertising them. So it was a comment on our society rather than an appreciation of the products and the themselves and all that goes with it. It was definitely a criticism, a cultural criticism rather than an appreciation of that. And is there another part of this question? I think I've forgotten. And we'd been talking about this earlier too, why Jim's work was appreciated more in Europe than in the US initially. And I think his link with surrealism, or, he certainly admired the surrealists, and he definitely had some surrealist qualities in a lot of the work, especially being done at that time. Also, the European collectors just got it more quickly, like Peter Ludwig and Pontus Hultén from the Moderna Musette. All of these people had a big affinity for Jim's work from the start, and the American museums and the American collectors lagged behind a bit at that time. They weren't quite as sure that was, the way to go. And Count Panza, another European collector, had many works from the 60s by Jim, and they're all now at LACMA in California. So it was interesting. And when we were talking earlier, it was about why the Europeans had a really more sophisticated and taste in some ways, and more knowledge of surrealist artists and art. So.
지금 보시는 작업도 대표작인데 스톡홀m에 있는 모데나 무셋에 소장이 되어 있거든요. 미국의 주요 미술관에도 작업이 있긴 하지만 어쨌든 유럽에 굉장히 많이 작품이 소장되어 있는 경우가 로젠퀴스트 작가의 경우입니다. 다음번 질문입니다. 사실 팝아트라는 명칭을 작가들은 별로 좋아하지 않았답니다. 시대별로 다른 명칭이 쓰이기도 했어요. 자, 보면은 이제 프랑스 쪽의 영향을 받아서 한때는 신사실파라는 이름이 신사실주의라는 명칭이 쓰이기도 했습니다. 자, 그리고 이제 또 한쪽에서는 앨런 카프로라고 하는 상황주의의 영향을 받은 사람이 환경, environment라는 개념을 썼어요. 요즘의 녹색의 환경하고는 다른 의미, 새로운 인공 환경을 총칭하는 개념이었답니다. 자, 그래서 팝 아티스트 예술가들도 그런 작업을 꽤 많이 만들었고, 그 각도에서 60년대 미국 팝아트를 해석하면 새로운 모습이 나타나기도 해요. 카프로는 이제 본인은 팝아트 같은 걸 안 만들었지만 팝아티스트나 대지미술가들에게 상당한 많은 영향을 미쳤습니다. 그래서 로젠퀴스트도 자기의 그림으로 일종의 경험의 시공을 만들려는 그런 경향이 있었습니다. 그래서 일종의 그림 안으로 뚫고 들어가는 경험을 제공하고자 마일라 커튼처럼 작품을 제작하기도 했어요. 자, 이러한 작가의 사고방식에 대해서 여쭤보겠습니다.
You know, I think it was such a fertile time with, Alan Capro using nature to kind of open people's eyes to what could be done as far as an artwork goes. And Jim really was experimenting a lot in the late 60s. The Mylar paintings were one example when it's cut Mylar so you could walk. They hang from the ceiling and you can walk through the paintings. And that was, Jim had said it at that time that he really wanted the painting itself as an object to disintegrate and the molecules just to, fly apart. So it wouldn't exist anymore. That was the idea behind it. And although he used very kind of prosaic imagery on those paintings, a lot like bologna and red sauce and different things. And then for Forest Ranger, he used a tank. But it was, he really wanted to create an immersive environment for the viewer and for the viewer to become part of the painting. And he continued on doing that with F111. Well, actually was done before the Mylar paintings, but the room paintings that he did, and Horizon Home Sweet Home, which was done in 1970 after the Mylar paintings, where you could be surrounded by the painting and Horizon Home Sweet Home. There was no imagery at all. It was reflective Mylar, painted panels of gradated color, and then different kinds of fog. He experimented with mineral oil and also with dry ice. And now that painting is going up at ROPAC in Paris this month, if you're in Paris, because it's kind of a really wonderful thing to see. But there was no imagery in that one at all. But I think Alan Capro and all the happenings and all the things that people were doing that were so, very loose and free and allowed everyone to be incredibly experimental and get as far away as you could from the more traditional paint on canvas, although Jim continued to love that, to the end. So, but yes, absolutely, all those events in the 60s were a huge influence.
자, 그러면 자연스럽게 다음 질문으로 연결이 됩니다. 자, 이제 모마의 경우에는 로젠퀴스트의 대표작 F111, 111을 주요 소장품으로 갖고 있고 굉장히 그걸 내러티브상, 서사에서 강조하고 있어요. 하지만 처음부터 사랑을 받았던 작품은 아니에요. 68년도에 뉴욕 매트에서 전시가 될 때에는 현대의 역사화로서 이게 과거의 그림들과 함께 전시되는 게 옳지 않다라고 하는 아주 강한 반발, 비판이 있었습니다. 그렇기 때문에 오히려 더 지금은 이야기거리가 많은 작품이 되었는데요. 보면 작가는 이 작품이 텍사스의 놀이공원에서 본 오래된 폭격기를 보고 영감을 받았고 하나의 아이디어, 군산복합체를 비판하는 내용만 있는 건 아니고 사실 세 가지 아이디어가 이렇게 중첩된 작품이라고 이야기했습니다. 자, 여기에 대해서 조금 설명을 부탁드릴게요. 이 작품이 그래서 아까 앞에 설명드린 그 경험으로서의 예술, 이머시브 아트, 요즘 유행하는 작품들의 이제 조상님인 거죠. 하나의 공간이 되는 그림. 자, 이거의 출발점이라고도 볼 수 있겠습니다.
Well, it was definitely the first really immersive work, and it was painted for the Leo Castelli Gallery to fit the gallery space. And I think all the artists were kind of competing at the time to who could, fill up the space most dramatically. And as to the layers of meaning for F-111, I mean, it was a anti-war painting, definitely. It was anti-war in Vietnam. It was a theme that he's continued in many later paintings as well, of painting a political statement. And in this case, it was about how war destroys certain aspects of people's lives, or, destroys people altogether. And the foolhardiness of it. It was also about the blindness of the public, and also the lack of reporting on the war, where you just didn't have all the information, especially at that time that he painted F-111 in 1964. I mean, of course, you had news, and news from Vietnam, but you didn't have the breadth of knowledge that we have today, and the distraction of products and buying things and the commercial culture, that was a huge distraction to keep, to numb the mind of the consumer and not to think about all these things that are going on that we might not like if we were really paying attention. So I think it is about distracting everyone who was living at the time, and trying to just think a shiny new toaster is going to, make a difference in your life. And I mean, that, of course, is still going on today, so not much has changed on that score. I think, I also think F-111 was the first painting that kind of intimated some of his later paintings that dealt with space and multiverses, and his idea, like in the Sea Snark, when he wanted to make it airborne, F-111 really had that idea too. Although it was a war airplane, it was a way of moving into another universe, into the multiverse, that wasn't really spelled out in that painting, but there was little hints of it in that painting that you can see more fully later on, and especially in his very last series of paintings.
시간 관계상 10번은 스킵하도록 하겠습니다. 자, 11번째 질문이 곧바로 이어지는 게 좋을 것 같아요. 모마는 로젠퀴스트 작가를 중시하는 것 같음에도 불구하고 아직 작업색의 전반을 다루는 대형 회고전을 연 적이 없어요. 이 점이 섭섭하지는 않으신지 궁금합니다.
Well, I could talk about this for hours, but no, but actually, MoMA has been great about showcasing Jim, and F-111 is almost always up. And they have at least 4 other paintings by him. The Guggenheim did do a really wonderful retrospective in 2009. And the Whitney has done 2 retrospectives of Jim, one in the 80s and one in the 70s, I think. So he is... he is well represented as far as, that kind of exhibition, just not at the Modern. Of course, if the Modern wanted to do a retrospective, that would be really great. So if anyone wants to call them and suggest.
글렌디 라우리 관장님이 2025년도 은퇴하십니다. 자, 지금 보시는 건 63년도 중요했던 전시죠. 아메리칸스 1963년 전시 때 이제 로젠퀴스트 작가님의 작품이 전시가 되고 있는 아주 중요한 순간이 되겠습니다. 자, 이 이머시브 아트 얘기를 조금 더 해보면, 이제 사진 가운데 하나 보면 이 홈 스위트 홈 지평선 작업의 경우에 작가가 스튜디오에서 이렇게 극장용, 영화관용 의자를 설치해 놓은 게 있어요. 그냥 의자가 아니라 영화관용 의자라는 건 의미가 다르죠. 영화처럼 이 작품들을 내가 푹 빠져서 볼 수 있다라고 하는 걸 약간 의미하는 바가 있으니까요. 아까 보셨던 작가의 사진도 바로 그 의자에 앉아있는 모습이랍니다. 작가가 이런 제스처를 취하는 경우가 스튜디오에서 더 있었는지 궁금해요.
Yes, I mean, the chairs, I think, were studio chairs, but people did sit and look at the painting. And the fog part of the painting is so hard to get going, and especially when he was using mineral oil. So I think when he actually showed it in a gallery setting, I don't think there were ever chairs in it, but the chairs are interesting because at that time he was also doing some films and experimental films, and we have some footage that we haven't been able to find a machine to play them yet. But there was a script, and it was a very kind of surrealist-like film with light bulbs falling on an umbrella and a lot of different things that he was shooting in East Hampton. But I don't, so the fact that those are theater chairs is kind of interesting, and he's working on a film at the same time. So there are, connections there, and Horizon Home Sweet Home is a really beautiful setting for something to happen. So I don't think he filmed in there, but except for when he was setting it up and when people were coming to see it, he did film that when people would get lost in the fog. And it was very immersive again, and very kind of magical and unpredictable, which I think he really enjoyed.
자, 이렇게 기술에 굉장히 관심이 많은 작가였지만 내 작품을 보는 데 필요한 건 당신의 직관과 태양빛 뿐이다라고 말하곤 했습니다. 그럴 때 보면 또 올드스쿨 화가들 마치 모네 같습니다. 그러니까 회화의 힘을 믿었던 작가인 거죠. 그리고 큰 페인팅도 다 직접 손으로 제작할 때는 아까도 잠깐 우리 톰슨 선생님과 이야기 나눴지만 파토스 포럼에, 그러니까 작가의 정념이 그림에 깃든다는 걸 믿었던 작가인 것 같아요. 어떻게 생각하시나요? 사진 준비해 봤어요?
Oh, yeah, most definitely. He loved painting. He loved the process of painting, and he loved the water lily painting. And I'm sure that was in the back of his mind sometimes when he was working on other paintings of his that were immersive as well. He really was, he was not traditional at all about his thinking, but his materials were could be conventional, and sometimes weren't. But when he was painting, he 90% of the time used oil, and he always wanted the best oil paints, and he really felt strongly about creating an atmosphere. And I think he really felt that the time the artist puts into the painting comes back to the viewer, and that energy, is there some kind of energy transference there? And I think that was it's a very kind of traditional idea, really. I mean, it could be applied to, previous centuries, but what he did with it was something less traditional. When we were talking earlier, I was talking about when we live with certain paintings, well, actually all of his paintings, if one goes out to an exhibition, the energy leaves, and it feels completely stark in there, and it's not visually, it's actually the energy field. Something has left. So I think he knew that, and he put so much into each canvas, not only ideas, but, physical labor. And there's so, you can look at them for years and not be bored looking at the same painting for years. Sometimes we've had one painting up for about 10 years, or 7 years really, and I can still lie on the couch and stare at it, and it, is still equally satisfying. So, I think most artists understand this concept. But it's a wonderful thing. It's a powerful thing, really, isn't it?
자, 우리 로젠퀴스트 작가는 다른 팝 아티스트들과는 달리 이제 사회 비판적인 문제의식을 이제 작업 세계 내내 유지한 인물로 보통 이야기가 되기도 합니다. 그러한 비판적인 의식이 두드러진 작업이 있을까요? 어떤 걸 더 대표적인 작업으로 생각하시는지 궁금합니다.
It's hard to choose one, really, because I think most of his paintings have some underlying political commentary. If you think of like the doll paintings that are, one is here in the exhibition, those were painted during the AIDS crisis, and Jim was wondering if our daughter would have to be in a hazmat suit to have a relationship with someone when, would she ever know what a direct touch would be. And, they were painted at the height of all the paranoia and misinformation about AIDS. So, that's one example. And then there's another, the daily portrait in the other room was about the violence that occurred in Chicago in 1968 during the Democratic Convention. And I think it's just such an amazingly smart and interesting portrait, because from afar it looks, if you're far away, you can't tell it's painted on mylar that's been cut. But if you come up close, you can see that. And if the wind blows, which Jim wanted it to blow, and kind of break apart the image of Daley, who was mayor of Chicago in 1968, and he was very brutal to the protesters at the convention, and he was really wildly hated in the United States at the time by a lot of people. But what he did with that kind of political commentary, he made something very poetic out of it. So just by a breeze, just a little breeze could break apart the image of Mayor Daley and kind of erase him. And the contrast with that kind of poetic effort and Daley's violent tactics was really so smart and interesting. I honestly, I do think really almost, if it's not the environment, if it's not election years, he always was painting. He painted about the famine in the Sudan in 1990. And a lot of these paintings, you don't really see the content right away. And it just emerges slowly. So I would really say his entire work really is about political commentary in many ways.
가장 흥미로운 작업 가운데 하나가 48m짜리 작품 경제 안개 속을 수영하는 사람이라고 하는 97년, 98년도에 제작한 작품이 있어요. 자, 이제 독일이 통일되고 난 다음에 이제 유로화 체제를 막 독일 경제가 중심이 돼서 만들어 나가던 때에 세계 경제 상황, 그 질서의 변화를 이제 비평하고 반영하고 있는 작품입니다. 작가의 작업을 대표하는 작품이라고 볼 수 있어요. 당시에 난데없이 독일이 통일이 되고 소비에트 무너지고 엄청난 사회 변화가 있었고 우리 미술계에도 충격이 이만저만하지 않았습니다. 사실 이렇게 큰 긴 작업은 우리 스크린으로 볼 때는 좀 곤란하지만, 자, 아무튼 엄청난 대작이에요. 작가의 작업 세계에 거의 모든 게 담겨 있는 작품이라고도 볼 수 있는데요. 자, 여기에 대해서 조금 설명을 부탁드리도록 하겠습니다.
Yes, I'd be happy to. It was done for the Guggenheim, the Deutsche Guggenheim, and I think what Jim was trying to do was comment on all the upheaval you just mentioned and try to make sense of it using some imagery that he'd used in previous paintings, which were also politically oriented. This painting has a really dynamic kind of, where is it there? Yeah, well, he's using, of course, parts of Guernica, which is, of course, another very political painting. And I think he was commenting on different things that had happened in the past and that had led to this current moment in time. Look at it again, too. You know, in lipsticks and commercial imagery. It's, and also the helmet that he used in F-111. Some of it is a bit like the more things change, the more things stay the same. You kind of upheavals keep going, and it's also he was very excited about the wall coming down, as most of the world was, and being in East Germany with him when this painting was shown. It was a really interesting experience and something that he talked about a lot because he was asking different people that he ran into in East Germany, sometimes just on the street if they spoke English, sometimes at dinners, how they felt. And I remember him remarking that it was strange to him that, everyone wasn't rejoicing, but then he realized that they had a very set system and they went to a certain school and you were guaranteed a job and you did not have to, really think about it. You could just go along. And some people were sad that wasn't possible anymore. But of course, most people were pretty happy about it. The techniques he used in this painting are very dramatic because he never used a computer in his work, but he built these analog kind of machines. He took a cardboard cylinder, and lined it with Mylar, and it had a crank on it, so you could crank it and spin it. Some of them had cranks, some of them you just did it by hand, and it was on a little stand, and he would take pictures of things he wanted to include in the painting, both abstract and realistic. And so he was using film, and like throwaway cameras sometimes. You get them developed, bring them back, take pictures, but initially he was taking pictures of like slinkies or Mylar or different things, and then the tube was with Mylar. So when he took pictures, he had one of his assistants crank it, and when he took pictures, it was incredible the effects that would happen. And a lot of people said, "Oh my God, you're using a computer now," but he wasn't. He wasn't using a computer. It was so old-fashioned. It was like he was on the farm building something like a toy to play with, or something that he could use. And it was just kind of extraordinary what he was able to get out of this simple. It was a very simple concept. Line a tube with Mylar and then make it turn, and then take pictures as you're. It's a two-person job, I think. But anyway, so he really devised some new methods in this painting, and that was a kind of really exciting moment from him. And then he could do all the speed of light paintings, getting those really big swirly effects that were really photos that he took of just stuff he threw in the cylinder and spun around. So.
사실 이 당시부터 다다식 고성과는 좀 다르게 여러 비판적인 이미지들을 전유해서 중첩시키는, 즉 상징 형식으로서의 레이어라고 하는 이제 새로운 문제의식을 로젠퀴스트 작가가 주도해 나가게 됩니다. 그렇기 때문에 보면 일찌감치 독일의 팝 아티스트로 출발했던 지그마 폴카 같은 사람들이 로젠퀴스트에게 영향을 받았지만 아래세대의 작가들, 미국 포스트 모더니즘 세대인 데이비드 셀리, 제프 쿤스 모두 작가에게 영향을 받았어요. 로젠퀴스트 선생님한테. 또 유럽에서는 미셸 마이에루스 같은 작가들도 아주 강하게 이런 작품들로부터 영향을 받았습니다. 자, 그래서 기존의 미술사학자들은 로젠퀴스트를 분석할 때 역시 다다나 초현실주의로 분석하는 경우가 많지만 사실 로젠퀴스트만의 이런 다중 레이어의 사용, 이런 부분에 대한 해석이 좀 필요하다고 볼 수 있어요. 대표적인 작업들이 이제 73년도에 등장한 이런 페이퍼 클립 같은 작업을 보면 앞선 시대의 방법과는 조금 달라지는 모습을 볼 수 있어요. 보시면 나중에 바스키아가 앤디 오월과 협업을 할 때에도 그런 레이어 구조 면에서는 로젠퀴스트에게 상당히 영향을 많이 받은 걸 알 수 있고, 자, 이제 로젠퀴스트의 80년도 작업, 스타 딥 같은 작업들, 이런 좀 어떻게 보면 약간 괴상하다고 할 수 있는 중첩 이미지들, 애프터 베를린이라고 하는 역시 이제 탈냉전 시기에 대한 작품, 이런 작품들 보고 있으면 아래세대 작가들이 엄청 많이 훔쳐간 걸 알 수 있답니다. 제프 쿤스의 2002년작 Easy Fun Ethereal 시리즈에 속하는 작업을 보면 도상 구조나 방법론 거의 똑같은 걸 알 수 있답니다. 데이비드 셀리는 말할 것도 없죠. 심지어 회전하는 이미지 그대로 훔쳐간 셀리의 2005년작 플로트가 되겠습니다. 자, 로젠퀴스트 작가에게 이렇게 많은 것들을 훔쳐간 인물들이 있어서 어찌 보면 한 시대가 창출되었다고 볼 수 있는데요. 어떻게 생각하시나요?
You know, Jim didn't really mind this. I mean, the only time I heard him get upset was when Jeff Koons painted some very similar paintings to painting some speed of light paintings, and then Jim had already had a show of those paintings, but Jeff did it, and then Koons sold all of his and Jim didn't sell his. So that was the only time he said, "Oh, come on now," you know. But he wasn't really mad because what he said was, you know, we all take from other artists and we all learn by copying other artists too. And he also used to say, well, at least somebody likes my paintings. So, you know, he would joke around about, you know, I think he was kind of flattered, really, that they thought his paintings were so good that they wanted to do them too. So, you know, it was, he didn't feel bad about it. So I think one thing he did say, though, once he said, I just don't understand why people don't want to think of their own ideas, because it's much more fun to do that than it's much more interesting. But of course, you know, those artists do have their own ideas and they have, you know, done that. So they were just little instances. I mean, some of them were, you know, both David and Jeff had some were so similar you thought it might be a Jim painting, but it didn't really bother him, you know.
사실 아랫세대들에게 도상적으로 비슷한 영향만 있는 건 아니에요. 예를 들면 예전에 제가 아트페어에서 줄리 모레트가 한참 뜨고 있을 때 빵빵년대에 아트 딜러가 뭐라고 해서 하나 들었더니 몬드리안을 폭발시킨 것 같지 않으십니까? 라고 해서 파는 거예요. 근데 사실 보고 있으면 몬드리안식 올드스쿨 추상을 로젠퀴스트식 이미지의 소용돌이로 전치시키면 줄리 모레토의 그림이 나오는 것처럼 느껴지기도 한답니다. 바로 이런 그림들인 거죠. 그래서 외형적으로 비슷하지 않아도 이런 클라이도스코픽한 비평적인 구성을 취하는 데 있어서는 로젠퀴스트의 영향이 아랫세대에게 상당히 널리 퍼져 있다고 저는 생각합니다. 역시 벽화 규모로 거대하게 작업하는 것도 미국식 레거시라고 볼 수 있겠습니다. 자, 사실 이제 시간이 많이 소요됐기 때문에 계속 질문을 드리지 않고 다음번 이제 작가가 이제 왜 판화 기술 발전에 관심을 기울였는지 넘어가도록 할 텐데 곧바로 통역사 선생님께 부탁을 드릴게요.
Well, Ken Tyler had been asking him to work with him for years, and he liked Ken, but he didn't really think, oh, I don't have any ideas, I don't know what I want to do with him, I don't want to do the same old thing. And so he kept going to Ken and say, well, if I could make the biggest print ever with you, then I'll work with you. And if we can use paper pulp, and if we can, if you can figure out a way to do it. And he never thought Ken would actually make all these different arrangements for him, and he did. And Ken actually invented a machine for the paper pulp that it was such an elaborate and crazy operation, but they both Jim and Ken loved it because it was doing the impossible to make a print that big, to use paper pulp. They did so many complicated technical things, the prints were just beautiful. They really are like paintings almost. They're just very dramatic. And in the imagery for those, you see a lot of Jim's environmental concerns, like Welcome to the Water Planet. You also see some of his kind of interest in outer space, like Caught One, Lost One, for the fast student, has a big pot floating in a starry sky. They're just kind of extraordinary images, and the technique. I don't think anyone else has done that. It was so physical. If you see the pictures of him working, he's actually lying on this. The print is on the ground, and Jim is lying on it, on this pulley, not a pulley, but a bar that two people are pushing him over the print. It was so crazy, very physical, very, do you see, oh yeah, it's right there. Picture is worth 1,000 words. But so this was just an insane thing, and they made all these metal grids for the paper pulp and to get the right color in the right place, and it was just a crazy project, but I think they both had a good time doing it, and the prints ended up being beautiful. So.
자, 21세기의 로젠퀴스트 작가는 시간과 공간, 우주의 문제에 관심이 많았던 것 같아요. 자, 그러니까 평야의 사람으로서 지상의 뷰로 세상을 보다가 비행기로 올라가서 버드 뷰로 새의 시각으로 세상을 보다가 고층 빌딩에 올라가서 보다가 과학기술의 발전으로 여러 가지 관점들을 복합하다가 최종적으로는 우주적 비전에 도달했다라고 볼 수 있습니다. 자, 보면은 역시 예술가들이 아까 우리 조그만 배 타고 우주로 날아가는 망상을 했듯이 결국은 모든 예술가들의 핵심은 매체에 있는 게 아니라 결국은 그 비전, 망상에 존재하는 것 같아요. 자, 이제 작가분이 건강하게 지금도 만약 살아서 계속 활동하셨다고 하면 새로운 시대에 어떠한 생각을 하고 어떠한 작업을 전개했을지 이제 그 생각을 우리 미미 톰슨 선생님의 생각을 이야기를 좀 들어보고 싶습니다.
Oh gosh, that's a hard one. I wish he were here to answer that question, because I don't really. I can only guess. Of course, it would be something wild and crazy, and something scientifically new. I mean, as he got older, he spent more time with scientists, and he had this one friend that he used to go to the diner with who shot a lot of films of scientists. I'm not sure. There were different films about different scientists and different topics, but and he started to read and have scientists write for some of his catalogs of his shows. So he was very interested in, well, as he was early on with the Mylar things, he wanted his paintings to dissolve. I mean, if he could have figured out a way to make like a painting appear here and then disappear and be out the window, and but then he didn't want to use a computer. So, I don't really know how he would handle that kind of disconnect. I think if someone showed him a really interesting way to create his craziest idea in a completely new way, he would absolutely be for it. But I think he felt the computer was too rote, and then it didn't, was too slick. It didn't have the energy of paint, or it didn't have, and yet, I think he would have had fun if he had been willing to try the computer. But he just never was. He just really refused, and it was the Mylar cylinder was as far as he got towards a kind of crazy thing that can really manipulate imagery. For his last paintings, I always felt he was kind of painting where he was going, but that's just me. He never said that to me, so I can't really. Did I answer that question? Okay. Did I? I'm not sure.
여러분들 이번 전시에서 이 그림 앞에 있어서 이 블랙홀로 모든 그림이 말려 들어가는 걸 망상하면서 그림을 보시면 굉장히 재미있어요. 눈에 보이는 이미지로 독해하지 마시고 작가의 동세, 망상과 함께 그림을 보시면 나 자신의 위상까지 이상하게 빨려 들어가는 망상에 동참하실 수 있답니다. 자, 오늘 귀한 말씀 들려주신 미미 톰슨 선생님 보시면 작가분과 마찬가지로 굉장히 과장 없이 가감 없이 아주 편안하게 있는 그대로 말씀해 주시는 분이에요. 이런 기회가 사실 흔치 않기 때문에 오늘 긴 시간 말씀해 주신 톰슨 선생님께 여러분들 박수 부탁드립니다. 감사합니다.